guided tour through the delicate and often overwhelming balancing act between food indulgences and social acceptance. And now, as always, here are your hosts, Rod Budget and Hugh Gallen.
Hello, and welcome to this week's show. I'm Rod.
I'm Hugh.
And tonight we'll talk about a food for thought segment, strategic snacking, and Hugh and myself will review the new Doritos Loaded. So, Hugh, let's jump right in with your food for thought.
Okay, thank you, Rod. So, to start this off, a question. What constitutes a sandwich?
I mean, to me, a sandwich, I think, first of all, bread. Bread with pretty much anything in between, no matter how many layers. If it's one layer, if it's 30 layers, that's a sandwich. It's something surrounded by bread.
Okay. Further elaborating, bread of any type, would you say?
I mean, off the top of my head, it's bread of any type. Yeah, I think it could be a hard roll. It could be traditional white bread, wheat bread, submarine sandwich, if you will. But there's generally two sides to it that are surrounded by quote-unquote bread. Okay,
I think that's probably a pretty safe and standard and reasonable answer. Further elaborating, what do you think? Is a wrap, is that a sandwich?
Absolutely not. It's a wrap.
Okay.
That's why they call them wraps.
Okay, so a wrap is a wrap and a sandwich is a sandwich. And this is actually a debate that happened in my house between my wife and I, because we would go out for sandwiches and she would get a wrap, and then, I don't know, just being smart, I'd be like, that's not a sandwich, that's a wrap. So I'm just going to bring this along a little further. In your eyes, I'm assuming then a burrito wouldn't qualify as a sandwich. If you said a wrap, then I was going to ask you if a burrito, but you would agree then a burrito would be a sandwich.
Has anyone seriously argued that a burrito is a sandwich? That's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. A burrito is a burrito. Am I insulting your wife at this point?
No. And in fact, I'm going to answer the question you just asked is a good one, and I'm going to answer it in a minute. So I just want to continue this exercise just a little bit more. You gave, I think, again, a very good definition of a sandwich before. So I want to ask you, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Absolutely not. A hot dog is a hot dog.
Okay.
Although, within my definition, I guess a hot dog might be a sandwich. So perhaps you found a loophole in my definition.
Okay, and like I said, I'm not trying to trick you here, but I'm looking to set a stage here. Last question for now then. A bagel with butter. Is that a sandwich?
This is an interesting one because there are bagel sandwiches out there. I think of a bagel sandwich as being a bagel with, say, egg or bacon or cheese or all of the above. So bagel with simply butter, I do not consider a sandwich because butter is a simple condiment that melts within the bagel infrastructure.
The reason I'm asking you all these probing questions and to get your take is because in the state of New York, the Department of Taxation and Finance has defined sandwiches fairly specifically with examples. And the reason is because in the state of New York, sandwiches are subject to a particular sales tax that's not subject to other food.
Wow, and this is a state tax?
This is a state tax provision. And so, the state of New York, you said earlier, has anyone defined a burrito as a sandwich? And I don't want to give the answer yet, but I do just want to say that the state of New York has defined what a sandwich is. This is from Tax Bulletin ST 835, issued on April 13, 2011 by the Department of Taxation and Finance. It says sandwiches include cold and hot sandwiches of every kind that are prepared and ready to be eaten, whether made on bread, bagels, rolls, in pitas, in wraps, or otherwise, and regardless of the filling or number of layers. So that's the definition they've done for taxation purposes.
Okay, first of all, prepared and ready to be eaten. Who's writing this stuff? What is prepared and not ready to be eaten? Something frozen or inedible, perhaps?
Well, I think you answered the question, but who's writing this? Lawyers are writing this. And this is probably part of the problem is when you get lawyers involved in food definitions and planning here. And not to say it's an easy thing. I'm going to go back through some of my questions from before. And now you've given your answers, which I think are good answers for the general populace, and I think what most people would say. But now I want you to think about what the New York State Taxation and Finance would say. Do you think, according to them, a wrap is a sandwich?
Yes.
Do you think a burrito is a sandwich?
Yeah, I guess so. If they're preparing it in front of you, a la Chipotle or something like that.
Ding,
Yes.
ding, ding. Yes, a burrito is a sandwich. One I didn't ask you about before, an open-faced sandwich. It's got the word sandwich in it, but it's open-faced. Is an open-faced sandwich a sandwich?
I believe, according to the state of New York, it may very well be a sandwich.
Okay, how about according to the state of Rod? Is an open-faced sandwich a sandwich?
Not really, honestly.
Fair
no.
enough. Why not?
Like I said, a sandwich needs to be two pieces of bread with things trapped between it, not an arc of bread. If you can envision a valley of bread with things thrown in it, it's a different topic to Rod. I can see where people would say that is a sandwich, but a Philly cheesesteak is a Philly cheesesteak, and that is similar to what you're talking about.
Okay. Hot dog. Is it a sandwich according to the New York State of Taxation and Finance?
I might be cheating here, but it probably is because so many hot dogs are sold in the state of New York that they want it as revenue.
There's no such thing as a bad reason. You're right. The other reason it definitely is because, of course, they're going to tax everything they can. So suffice to say, most things that you could consider a sandwich, they do consider a sandwich. We've got open-faced sandwiches. We've got flatbread sandwiches listed here. We've got gyros. We've got burgers, of course, hot dogs, melts.
Pizza sandwiches, maybe?
Is a pizza a sandwich?
According to the state of New York, it probably is.
It actually isn't. They've drawn the line somewhere, apparently, and from what I can tell with my legal mind, a pizza is not a sandwich. Although I would
That
say,
is the lie.
if you're breaking it down on certain lines, I'm not sure what the delineation would be. You've got
it
a
gets
bread
very
layer,
fuzzy.
you've got meat and
very
cheese,
fuzzy.
and it's open on top. I think that you could easily make an open-faced sandwich and call it a pizza as long as you got the right stuff on it. Or, you could argue that the pizza is the open-faced sandwich.
So Hugh, is this relatively new? Is this a new tax, or has this been around for a while?
Tax has been around for a while, from what I understand, but this bulletin, to help define it, came out in 2011. Now, I want to real quick give credit to where I heard about this first. I heard about it on a podcast, NPR, Planet Money, and they really talked about the taxation aspects of it. They talked a little bit about what was a sandwich, but I think that's obviously our beat, which is why we're here to talk about it. You asked just about the history of the tax. So
I was assuming there would be some sort of uproar from the New York Restaurant Sandwich Association or something of that sort.
I don't know if there is a New York Sandwich Association, but I would be glad to join it.
I think we are honorary unofficial members.
There are certain... You actually kicked on something early on where you said prepared and ready to be eaten. And from what I understand, that's one of the major hinges on when you open your establishment, what is ready to be eaten. And then you get into a situation where, what about a burrito that's frozen at 7-Eleven but put in the microwave? Who puts it in the microwave? And if I do it myself, is that then is it a sandwich? If I walk out of the store with it frozen as opposed to microwave, does that make a difference? Does the tax change? These are all questions that I actually don't have the answer to right now, but I imagine a good lawyer would.
I'm more curious about a place like Chipotle where my burrito is not ready to be eaten when I walk in. They make it in front of me. Although, as you take the ingredients separately, theoretically, I guess I could eat the beans. I could eat the tortilla because it's hot. But my burrito's not ready when I walk in.
Right, and it's not... But I think once it's prepared and ready to be eaten. So I think that means by the time it's prepared. So I would think your Chipotle burrito would count. But if you order a salad at Chipotle, it has the same ingredients. It just happens to come in a bowl instead of a covered wrapping.
As a sandwich lover, I personally think it's completely bogus. I'm just going to put that out there. What is the sandwich tax? Do you have any insight into how much these fine establishments that are trying to just make a living are being taxed for producing a quote-unquote sandwich?
Well, make no mistake, the tax is paid by you and I, the sandwich lover. It's just the business owners just pass it on to us. I don't know exactly what the tax is, and as I understand it, it changes, yearly. They increase it. But I mostly know about the bulletin that defined the sandwich because of some of the controversy over what constituted a sandwich.
I always figured that Blimpies were disappearing from New York City because of poor quality, but now I have to question that. It may very well be the sandwich tax.
As long as we're talking about sandwiches, I wanted to just give one quick pro tip on sandwiches. And it is simply this. Put coleslaw on your sandwich whenever you have the opportunity to do so. It's not necessarily a new thing. I'm not going to claim to have invented it, but it's something that I don't know if everyone does, and whenever it's suggested, I've gotten the response of rave reviews on it.
I've certainly heard of that and run into that and agree with that with pork, pulled pork type things, barbecue down in the South. I've never heard of it necessarily for any sandwich. Does it depend on the quality of the coleslaw, or are you just assuming that the coleslaw is solid, good coleslaw? Because I think coleslaw is one of those foods that has a ton of variation.
Yeah, well, you've got a cream-based coleslaw or a vinegar-based coleslaw, and I'll pretty much give my pro tip for any type of coleslaw and any type of sandwich. I think you hit probably on one of the finest, combinations is the pulled pork with coleslaw. But I'll even pull out your regular cold cuts and put coleslaw on it on a sandwich like that, and it turns out to be very impressive. The reason is you get the crunch of a vegetable, but with the sauciness of whatever the coleslaw is in. It's not that it's a new invention. My wife turned me onto it. She started doing it. Every time we go to the grocery store, we come back with a little bit of coleslaw just for our regular weekly house sandwiches. It takes a normal run-of-the-mill Sunday afternoon sandwich, kind of makes it feel special every time. I'll be buying stock in coleslaw very shortly because I think it's going to be up.
Hungry Dad! I'm going to talk about something I like to call strategic snacking. Shifting gears a little bit. Hugh and myself are growing older, in our 30s, married with families now. And there was a time when I think our listeners can relate that when you're in college or high school, you can eat whatever you want to, whenever you want to. Nobody's going to question you on it. But as you grow older, you have health concerns, you have family. Not that I would say my wife certainly, or your wife, is over our shoulders constantly nagging us. So strategic snacking is something that is very important as you grow older, and I think it will benefit our listeners. Just a few tips on how, if you want to have a quick snack, something that's not healthy, something that's not going to make you feel good about yourself, maybe someone close to you is going to question you on, here are a few tips on how to pull it off. First of all, you got to volunteer doing errands. You need a trip to the grocery store, a trip to the post office. If somebody goes to the post office or the bank anymore, you are the one to do it. Not because you're going to buy something gross or unhealthy at the grocery store, but because you're going to either take something unhealthy out of the fridge and have it on the way, or buy something on the way and eat it. And most importantly, you need to eat it on your way out and dispose of the refuse at wherever you're going. A lot of people don't think about, I'll have a little milkshake on my errand to the grocery store, and the next thing you know, you've got a McDonald's milkshake cup in the drink holder of the car, and someone comes in the car and says, "What is this?" So eat on your way out and dispose of it while you're out. There's public trash bins pretty much anywhere you go. Very important. Don't forget about...
I'm sorry, I want to hit on one key nuance of your advice, which was you were very specific to say that you're going to get something either from the fridge or at a drive-thru before you go to the grocery store. And I think that's important because what you have to remember is if you get that snack at the grocery store, it's going to show up on the receipt. And that is a very quick way for you to be found out about the candy bar or the slice of pie that you bought, unless you dispose of the receipt entirely, which sometimes people want to see the receipt. So you want that receipt to be available and you want it to be clean.
Not just the receipt. People don't think of the receipt, but you need to get that either out of there or have it clean. But you have to think of other aspects of what you're snacking on beyond just the traditional wrapper or whatever thing there is to dispose of. You've got smells. You can't stink up the car. Fast food is going to smell up the car for a good half hour to an hour, depending on the temperature outside. Smudges. Grease on the hands, on the steering wheel, within the car. That's a quick way to get caught. Crumbs, potato chips are hard to pull off. You think you're being clean, but then there are chips all over the seat when you get out, all over your person. You just can't do it.
So you mentioned a milkshake. What are some other examples of things that you think you can make a clean getaway with when you have a car?
3 big areas where when you're in the car running an errand, you can pull it off. Not much smell, not much mess. First of all, beef jerky. It's a polarizing food. I get it. I personally like it. It's salty, it's filling, it's inexpensive, doesn't leave a smell, doesn't leave much grease, especially if you peel the wrapper away as you eat it and hold the wrapper, and then the wrapper is easily disposed of. Crackers, if you're very careful with the crumb refuse, I find it's easier than chips, and I think it's an underrated snack food. Kind of the cheese crackers or peanut butter crackers you'll find. I personally like the Keebler cheddar cheese and the Keebler peanut butters.
There's kind of a trick with crackers where if you take a bite, if you do a little suck in,
exactly,
you'll vacuum those crumbs right in. Where do you want them in your mouth anyway?
Yeah, exactly. The cracker's hardy enough where you can do the sucking motion as you eat, whereas with an individual chip, it doesn't really work as well. And I'm a chip lover. Hugh's a chip lover. We'll get into that more in later episodes. But if you're sneaking covertly, it doesn't work as well. And finally, this is a liquid, but soda. If you're a soda person, very easy. No smell, no trace of it other than the cup, obviously, which you can dispose of. And I will say also, if you're unable to dispose of something on your way out, this is one of my favorite tips, is the hidden garbage can. Or the covert garbage can, not necessarily hidden, but here in suburbia, as you'll learn, I live in the suburbs, and Hugh is still kind of in the city life in the middle of Manhattan, where I used to live. But in the suburbs here, what I have installed is a kind of secondary garage trash can next to the larger trash can that is wheeled out with the actual trash bags in it every week for the garbage man. The secondary trash can is supposedly for, things you'll find in your yard. There's always garbage blowing into it, or even trimmings. If you trim the bushes outside, you throw some things in the garbage. The wife or whoever you might be, quote unquote, sneaking around a little bit, doesn't look in this trash can because they don't think there's anything interesting in there. And, you pull in the car, you go straight to the garage trash can, you throw it in there, you bury it under some grass trimmings or whatever may be in there. And, of course, you're the one responsible for taking out the garbage on garbage day. So, boom, pick it up from the secondary garbage can, put it in the main garbage can, and wheel it right out. And you're no worse for wear. But
you do need to bury it, even in that secondary place, because if it's laying right on top, it's visible to anybody.
Yes, burying. I probably glossed over that because it's obvious to myself and you professionals. Pretty much anything that you're not trying to get caught with, whether it be receipts or actual packaging, you gotta bury it pretty deep there. And don't use transparent garbage bags ever. You need to have a white garbage bag or a black garbage bag. They can't be seen through. And this is getting a little granular, but I don't want our listeners to get in trouble out there. If you have too much refuse on top of whatever you're hiding, it will press down and outline, say, a soda container against the garbage. If whoever you're sneaking around happens to see the outline of a garbage bag, they're going to see the outline of that bottle or that wrapper or whatever it may be. And the only other thing I'll say about strategic snacking is if you don't have a garage or a large enough area, you can have a secondary garbage can outdoors, even the side of the house or an apartment. Just say it's for yard trimmings, it's for weeding, because people really appreciate this. It's like you're doing hard work. You need your own little space to dispose of all of these chores that you're doing, and nobody's going to question that. So if you have to toss in a soda can or a chip wrapper, nobody's going to look in there. But bury it anyway. Always bury, folks.
It's interesting, you talked about some of the perils of covert eating in your suburban life and not having to drive a car all the time. And I have a somewhat different experience with the urban covert eating, but no less perilous. And for me, it was being about town, doing some snacking, walking rather than driving. And in our neighborhood, My wife is popular. She has friends. I got approached by one of my wife's friends while I was eating an absurdly large Rice Krispie treat. There was no denying that this Rice Krispie treat was noticeable, and my wife's friend even jokingly commented, "Wow, that's a big Rice Krispie treat." And I immediately said jokingly, "Let's not talk to my wife about this." But of course, she immediately texted my wife the minute we walked away, so that by the time I got home, I was already being asked about the Rice Krispie treat. On another occasion, I was walking down the street drinking a bag of chips. And when I arrived at my destination, which was our friend's house, everyone in the apartment asked, what kind of chips were those? I did not realize that they had a sky view of me walking down the avenue as I drank my chips, because they have a huge front window that approaches the street. So suffice to say that there is kind of a man on the street element of the eating that can get you caught up when you're exposed to the elements without a car. Nothing gets my wife more giddy and excited than when she makes a food snacking discovery. She just loves to say, "So how was the Snickers? Party mix, huh?" And she gets so much joy out of it.
That's why we're here for our listeners. We're trying to help you. And you brought up a few things that I think you've touched on that are great, and I think we'll elaborate on in later episodes. Walking and eating is a passion of Hugh that I think he will definitely expound on. And drinking chips, I think we all know what it means, but I think there's an art to it that we will definitely delve into at a later date and time.
Absolutely. Well, those are great tips, Rod, on the covert eating, and I think that we all walked away a little bit more skilled when we walked into this.
Hungry Dad. So I think the last thing we're going to do tonight is something we'll try to probably work into every episode because it's something our listeners crave. That is a review. And from time to time we'll do actual live reviews on air, which will be a lot of fun and I think compelling. We'll also do reviews of new and exciting snack or junk food that has come out recently that Hugh and myself have tried over the past week. So tonight we're going to review Doritos Loaded, which our listeners probably have heard of. It's had a pretty big marketing push, available exclusively at 7-Eleven stores. So it's not really a chip, it's a kind of cheese mozzarella type thing with Doritos flavoring going on. So Hugh and myself have tried those over the past week. And Hugh, why don't you just jump in and give us your impressions of Doritos Loaded, then I'll follow up.
Sure. I was relatively pleased with the Doritos Loaded. It piqued my interest because it is the most recent amongst a string of Doritos branded items other than Doritos themselves, and I found them to be quite good. I don't know if they were as successful as some of the other Doritos efforts, like the Taco Bell Doritos Locos Tacos, but I felt that the Doritos Loaded provided me with a new experience, but with that familiar Doritos flavor. As you said, it's essentially a cheese stick, although not in stick form, with more of a yellow cheddar cheese on the inside. I enjoyed it. I think that it hit a reasonably good note of the cheese on the inside with the Dorito dust on the outside.
Yeah, I'm not quite as bullish on it as you are. I see where you're coming from. I may have been tainted because there were no Doritos Loaded available behind the glass when I went into my 7-Eleven, so they had to hand prepare them in the oven for 4 minutes, which was kind of interesting. I got to see them actually prepare them. But when I got them, they were, surface of the sun hot. And of course I was in the car trying to covert eat, and I couldn't wait to try them. I was excited, and I literally didn't have the time to wait. So I turned the air conditioner up to full blast and put them in front of the AC for about 2 minutes in the car, hoping that they would cool down. It didn't help much. So my impression is you get 4 triangles of Loaded. I only finished 3. It was just, to me, it just tasted like really, really hot cheese, and the Dorito flavoring kind of got lost. This might be because they were not sitting. I think it's one of those foods where, as counterintuitive as it may seem, I think there are certain fast foods or snack foods that the longer they sit and kind of marinate, the better they are. I think this may be the case with Doritos Loaded. I don't think you want to eat them directly out of the oven because honestly, the cheese just overpowered everything. I burnt my tongue. I felt like an amateur burning my tongue. I feel like the cheese dust was completely lost. It just tasted like hot cheese to me. So I think Hugh probably had, correct me if I'm wrong, a already prepared loaded that was behind the glass and had been sitting there for a while.
That's exactly right. Mine was under the heating lights, I think as it was intended to be made. We've all experienced that burn your tongue on a hot slice of pizza, and that can quickly and immediately ruin an eating experience. You may not have gotten the true judgment on the Doritos Loaded. Because of that, I will say you didn't finish them, which is very telling because I have purchased things that I didn't particularly love, but I almost never throw anything in the trash unless it's awful.
Between the burnt tongue and just the hot, heavy cheese, after 3, I had a pretty good idea that I wasn't feeling it, and the 4th went covertly into a public trash can, quite frankly.
Take a regular mozzarella cheese stick. Do you enjoy those?
One of my favorite foods. Love them.
And yet this, essentially an amped up mozzarella stick, was not to your liking.
Well, I will make... I dip mozzarella sticks in marinara sauce, which I think greatly enhances them. I think the Loaded, presented as a extremely hot mozzarella stick with Dorito dust, it just tasted like an extremely hot mozzarella stick with no coating whatsoever. The dust got lost. It didn't taste like Doritos. It tasted like really, really hot, greasy cheese, which isn't super unappealing, but at the temperature it was at, it was just too hot. And maybe you're right. I've been skewed by the heat, but I think our listeners will come to learn that our reviews come down to would you eat it again or would you not eat it again? And Doritos Loaded, I would not eat again.
Doritos Loaded, I would eat again, and I did eat it again.
Wow. This is amazing revelation. This is great. Have you been back multiple times for Doritos Loaded?
I've been back. I've been twice. The first time I was trying to make a very strong assessment of it and thinking very hard about it. And then when I realized I was back near a 7-Eleven and I wanted to get it again, it confirmed my suspicion that, yes, this was a positive experience.
That's a ringing endorsement. And does your lovely wife know that you've had it a second time? That's the real question.
She does not know that I had it a first time.
Wow. Hugh Gallen has had Doritos Loaded multiple times.
If I can comment on your experience, I'm of two minds. First, I would say you mentioned that maybe it was kind of an amateur move. At the risk of sounding unkind, I think you did an amateur job at assessing these Doritos Loaded. I think you blew the opportunity by burning your tongue and sent it down a bad trajectory. That said, one shouldn't have to be an expert to enjoy a snack food, and the preparation of that food is as important as the taste. If one can't reliably expect the preparation to be non-threatening and to be enjoyable,
or consistent,
then your experience with the Doritos Loaded is a valid experience.
So if I can, I'll slightly revise my review to if there are Doritos Loaded behind the glass under the heat lamp, as they should be, perhaps give it a shot. If they are unprepared and someone has to put them in the oven for 4 minutes, do not even think about consuming them. Hungry Dads! Visit our website at hungrydads.com. Follow us on Twitter at hungry_dads. This has been a Hungry